We are still in Fallout. This is another story and lore episode. We are on part 3, so if you want to kind of follow things chronologically and you haven't heard the first 2 parts, you might want to go check those out first. And we are going to begin with Vault 13. So in our last episode...
We are going to continue.
Yeah. Well, begin this episode of
Yes.
We had just acquired the water chip from the necropolis, and we take it home to Vault 13. Now, within the game itself, if you return after 100 days, then water rationing has begun, and a water thief is stealing people's rations. And this is the canonical version of those events. And so you can do a quest to find the water thief, and they're arrested and turned in. But within the rationing and the theft of the water, there begins to rise a group of dissidents, one of which is your friend who is named Lyle. And he is one of the individuals who has had water stolen from him. And Lyle will then introduce you to Teresa. And they are leading a small group of people who are pushing to leave the vault because of the situation that is happening here. Now, within the game, you can either support them in, making that decision and they'll leave the vault, or you can talk them out of that. The canon version is that you talk them out of it. You actually talk them into staying into the vault. And then the vault dweller, you can kind of keep secret that you have the water chip, which will allow you to learn a lot more about what's going on within the vault and the decisions being made. One, we learned that you are not the first to be sent out for the water chip. So the chip broke and they had 150 days of water left, but it was failing before that. And other people were sent out before. The skeleton outside the door, we learned, was a man named Ed. And whether he just refused to go anywhere or wasn't let back into the vault, but he died right there. There was another individual named Talius who made it all the way to the necropolis when he was caught by super mutants and transformed into... he is mutated, but he doesn't become a super mutant. He just becomes a mutant ghoul, kind of like Harold is.
Okay.
And in conversations with the Overseer, you can press for the idea of leaving the vault, and he really pushes back about this. And if you really push him and investigate this, essentially what it comes down to is that he is aware from you and the other people that there are large groups of people living in the wasteland, and societies are developing and growing in cities. And his big reason for not leaving the vault is that he has no skills to survive in the wasteland, that the people won't need him, right? Technically, it is safer here, and he claims, the welfare of the people. But what it really comes down to is he doesn't see that he would have a place, so he doesn't want anyone to leave the vault because he needs them to run the vault. He can't run it on his own.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So he's really against going out into the wasteland because he doesn't have a place there. So we do give him the water chip, and he installs it. We get the water going, and then he asks for a final report. And so we submit this final report. He reviews it, and then he meets with us in secret to talk about the final report. Now, I will point out, within the canon, when we get to the hub, you can buy water, right? 100 extra days of water when you get there. It's not required, but what happens is if you buy the water from the water merchants, then people start to see this caravan going to and from Vault 13, and they learn its location. And that is the canon version, right?
Okay.
That these people are finding it. And so the Overseer is concerned with people now knowing the location of the vault. They can't use the secrecy to hide as much. And he's very concerned about the super mutants we have encountered. And it becomes clear from the report we make that they are far exceeding the expectations of Vault Tech on the number of mutations that would happen in response to radiation. And he reaches the conclusion that someone is clearly intentionally making these mutations, and that therefore it is unsafe for us to leave the vault. We've got to stay here. That's always his conclusion.
Right. He'll find any reason to...
He will find any reason to stay in the vault. Yeah. Because that's his position of privilege and power.
And I think not only that, but like they put this really well in the show when one guy calls the other, he says to the other guy, "You're a coward," and he looks back at him. He's like, "We're all cowards. That's why we live in vaults."
That's why we live in vaults. Yeah. So he tasks you with tracking down the lab where this is being done and destroying it so that it will be safer for the people to come out. Again, he's just full of BS. He has no intention of ever leaving this vault.
Right.
But within the games of Fallout 1 and 2, we can kind of begin to piece together the experiments that are performed in Vault 13. Now, there are two kind of contradictions here. One is that, so we encounter a computer that lists that Vault 13 was intended to stay closed for 200 years, simulating long-term isolation on a population. The purpose here was to gather that data for the use of creating that generational spaceship to lead mankind to a new home, right? We need to know what happens after generations of generations being stuck in this tiny little space together, right? So according to this computer file that we find in Fallout 2, that was the experiment of Vault 13, and the water chip was sabotaged, ending the experiment by forcing people out into the wastes.
Wait, so exactly what are you saying was the experiment?
200 years of isolation, right? They were supposed to stay closed for 200 years, much longer than it was theorized they would need to be closed.
I gotcha. Okay.
However, when we meet the Enclave has records stating that Vault 13 was to stay closed until it was needed, indicating that it was a control population, that if they ever needed to compare data against wasteland stuff going on, they could open Vault 13 and compare it to that population.
So, like, it might have been the Enclave's control, right? Because
like it's not a control as in it's a controlling vault. It was a true experimental control. Being like, okay, we've got a bunch of experiments that we have, but we need to compare them against something that wasn't experimented with, Vault 13.
That's also not one of ours.
Yeah. So both of those lore points are in Fallout 2, which, like I said, it creates this kind of conflicting lore narrative there on those 2 points. But we do get both those points, so you can kind of go where you want. And, maybe the idea was that, hey, we'll seal this out for 200 years. And if we need to, we'll find a way to pull out 1 or 2 from Vault 13 and take a look at them. So who knows exactly? But like I said, there is a lot of that. So tasked with finding the super mutants, we return to the wastes. Now, the only place we have heard of that we haven't yet visited is the Lost Hills bunker. We learn about this from the water merchants. They trade water with them, along with other farmers from the hub who trade food there. And so that is how we learn about this location. And we can journey to it, and we notice that it's just like looks like a single building guarded by guys in super heavy-duty armor, hacking miniguns.
And when you say guys, you mean super mutants?
No, these are humans, right?
Oh, okay.
This is the Brotherhood of Steel, right? Guys in power armor.
Okay, yes.
Hacking miniguns, right? And
the first time that you run into power armor in the Brotherhood of Steel in this game.
Yeah, this is the first time you encounter it. And one guy will tell you all about his amazing, super cool armor. And so the Brotherhood of Steel largely tries to maintain a control system, but they definitely fluctuate through periods of recruitment and non-recruitment as needed. And I imagine that this is a combination of, how many people they're losing, how diverse their gene pool is in these decisions, because we definitely have seen within their creed at times They don't allow outsiders to join. It's closed off. However, at this time when we meet the Brotherhood, they have recently been taking in new initiates, but they are no longer doing so. However, they are willing to make an exception if you can do something for them, right?
Of course.
And they task, so they call it the Glow Quest, right? The task is to go to a place called the Glow and recover something and bring it back to prove that you were there. And this mission is given as kind of an exception to join the Brotherhood because they have tried to go to the Glow and failed. It is thought as a suicide quest that they give you. Be like, we had power armor, we had energy weapons, heavy weaponry, old world tech, and we failed. What chance do you have? Right?
Yeah.
They send you to the Glow, and if you talk to them, they will reveal that there's also heavy radiation in the area, so you can go in prepared for radiation.
Hence the Glow.
Hence the Glow. Yes. So they give you the quest, and we journey to the Glow, and it is a long trek. So much so, like, I think it takes over 30 days there and back. And so to do this before acquiring the water chip would be very dangerous. You just don't have the time to make that kind of trek.
Yeah.
But yeah. So the Glow is a giant hole in the ground in very far south from almost anything else in the wastelands as we know it. And as we journey into it, it appears that what happened was a nuclear bomb was dropped on a Vault-Tec facility. Not a vault, but like a research center.
Sure.
But it did not detonate, thus creating just a giant hole as opposed to just a crater. However, it has been just leaking radiation ever since, thus maintaining the very high levels of radiation because it's not dissipating, it's constantly coming out and irradiating. Journeying inside the facility, we see that it has been switched to emergency power. So it's very dim, poorly lit, a lot of things aren't working. And inside we will find a Brotherhood of Steel dead. His power armor destroyed enough that it's no longer functional. But he has a holodisk detailing his team's discoveries inside it and kind of outlining how they fell. So
before we get into it, do you want to take a break here?
Yeah, we can take a break here, and when we come back, we'll talk about how the Brotherhood of Steel died in the Glow. Welcome back. We are covering the Glow and talking about the Brotherhood of Steel and how they failed. So the Glow is a Vault-Tec West Tech research center, has a lot of old world tech in it. Thus, the Brotherhood of Steel was what you sent to recover both information and equipment, weaponry, just any old world tech. That's what they do. They gather these old things and then decide what humanity can have and can't. That's the thing.
Yes.
So the team that was sent to the Glow died. They never returned, right? And it is at that point that the Brotherhood of Steel, between their battles with the super mutants and the loss of this team, has decided at this moment it is too dangerous to continue investigating it. But they give it out to anyone who wants to join, just to see if somebody gets lucky, right? Inside the Glow, we find the remnants of the team and a holodisk detailing. So it appears that the Glow, to be able to access everything within this facility, requires that the full power be turned on. Activating the full power will activate the defenses of the facility, which are heavily armed, very deadly robots. The Brotherhood of Steel team activated the power and were attacked by the robots, killing all but the final member of the team. He was the power armor wearing individual, which means two things. One, the suit provided him with radiation protection, but the suit was damaged so much that it was no longer protecting him from the radiation. But because he had the suit, unlike the other members of the team, he did not have the anti-radiation pills or Rad-X to protect him.
Mm-hmm.
So once his suit starts leaking, the radiation is killing him, and very quickly because it's very high, and he knows that. And that is when he pins his log. So the rest of his team is killed off by the robots within the facility. Something has happened, and the facility has powered back down. So we enter. It is on emergency power, and the defenses are no longer armed. But armed with his knowledge about that piece of information, we can begin to investigate and find ways to deal with that puzzle. We need to activate the power
without
deal with the defense.
having the robots come and kill us. Yeah.
So within the glow, we find a supercomputer with a lot of files about a lot of things, including what happened here at this facility and some of the other facilities around the area. Now, within that supercomputer, we also see an ability to deactivate the security defenses. However, this option will only work if the power is already turned on. So it's like if you go to deactivate the security defenses, it says security offline, right? As a place to just deactivate. So through careful mapping, the Vault Dweller is able to map a route from the generator to the supercomputer that avoids all of the defenses so that we can deactivate them without having to fight through them, like the Brotherhood of Steel did. And thus, we survived the glow where they failed. But it is really dependent on that key piece of information we get from them. Now, again, in your own playthrough, you may have been tough enough just to battle through the bots. It's a brutal battle. There's a lot of them, and they're tough. And there's other ways around it, but it's kind of the canon event is it was just learning how they failed and then mapping that route where we're like, okay, if I do this, I don't have to fight.
Very similar to avoiding gunfights in space, right? Because you don't want to get in a gunfight in space because once your suit's punctured, you're done. You're like, that's all it takes.
Yeah. Because one puncture in your suit, the radiation gets you.
Yes.
So through this facility, we encounter the details of the FEV virus, the forced evolution virus. In our introductory episodes, we talked about this a fair amount.
Yeah.
One of the first things we learn is that it was tested on raccoons. 2 raccoons, they became super intelligent, and they escaped, and they disappear. So within this series, we'll be talking about a lot. We'll be pulling from a lot of sources. We have the games themselves. We also have access to a lot of what's called cut content. So this was things they made for the game, but then didn't include. Maybe they didn't have enough time to finish it out all the way. So I will cover these 2 raccoons. So originally, these 2 raccoons were going to escape and create their own little raccoon society of super intelligent raccoons that you would encounter. That content was cut from the game. Their area was cut. The characters were cut. Everything. For the number one reason stated was they after they kind of fleshed it out a little more, they decided it didn't really fit in the world of Fallout. But also, it is in contradiction to the FEV virus, which makes everything sterile. And so they couldn't have really created this society unless they had the virus and were exposing other raccoons to it.
Right.
Now, pretty much everything except a single holodisk entry on these raccoons was cut. And now it's like maybe they decided it didn't matter if this was left in, or maybe in the cutting they forgot to cut out this piece. But nonetheless, this was left here. And so as we talk about some of these things, we will reference, right? We have the Fallout Bible, which, like I said, some of it is not considered lore, but nonetheless, it was written by one of the creators of Fallout, right? And then we have the cut content that we can talk about. So there's a lot of different sources we could pull through beyond the game to kind of fill in these lore gaps. So I did want to bring up these raccoons right now just to kind of talk about that.
I think those raccoons would have been a really fun addition if they.
Oh, I think you were really
cool. I think a lot of people would have liked that.
Yeah, I do too. I think yeah. Instead of just having them breeding to create this society, they just find raccoons, catch them, and then they expose them to FEV, just like the super mutants are doing, right? They're a raccoon army.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good one.
That would have been fun. Yeah. So the FEV was created to counteract the Chinese chemical warfare, right? And it created superior creatures. However, they do become sterile. And the reason is that gametes are only half of DNA. And so the FEV virus was seeing that as incomplete or damaged tissue and constantly repairing it. So instead of being half, it was full and therefore no longer useful for reproduction, right? And so that's how people were becoming, everything was becoming sterile on it. Furthermore, they learned that if human DNA was corrupted through exposure to radiation, then the resulting super mutant had very low intelligence. Right. Now, if they still had pure DNA, they would become more intelligent, right? So the super mutants, they gain a ton of strength, a ton of health and endurance, immunity to disease, immunity to radiation, immunity to cell death. They would essentially live forever. But exposure to radiation meant you became a total idiot after, right? But without that exposure to radiation, you became even smarter than they were before.
Which is kind of difficult to do in a world that's completely irradiated.
Yes. So, and that then becomes the interest of super mutants in vaults, right? The reason they want to vault is because that's unirradiated human DNA. You can get the good super mutants out of that.
Yeah.
And the final factor is that the FEV erases memories. So people come out maybe super intelligent, but not really knowing anything, right? So as we mentioned, I think in an introduction episode, this is why the master calls them children, because they had to be raised and taught like children once they come out of the vats. The other thing is that in the creation of FEV, there was also exploration into a possible cure for exposure to FEV. And what they learned is that FEV overwrites the existing DNA, right? If you look at super mutants, they all kind of look the same, right? All very
much so.
Male, female. It's because it's just overwriting their DNA. And so they did state that there would never be any kind of cure. What you would need is a copy of the original DNA connected to a virus that could override FEV. That would be the only way you could do it. But once again, you would lose memory because you'd just be overriding the DNA to recreate the person, but the memories would be gone yet again. And again, that helps us understand why are they losing memories, because it's just overwriting all the DNA. Okay, and the final thing we learned here is that most of the testing on FEV was done at the Mariposa military base. So if there's a lab of super mutants, that's where it's going to be. However, this computer does not give us the coordinates for it. Now, let's talk about dog meat. Okay, so according to the events in game, dog meat's owner came from somewhere in the East, and he wore a leather jacket, right? They say he even talked with a funny accent.
Mm-hmm.
And we meet him there, and then according to the Lone Wanderer's memoir, Dogmeat dies in a battle with super mutants at the Mariposa military base. However, Dogmeat does appear in Fallout 2, which is decades after Fallout 1. Within one of the holodisks at the Glow, we encounter a file where FEV was used on 9 dogs. They became super strong, super intelligent, and super aggressive, and all 9 were eventually put down. However, the disk notes that alleles were taken from them to perform an experiment on 14 more dogs to create a hybrid. And then there are no further details given. Dog meat is profoundly healthier, stronger, more robust than other dogs in the game. And so, like I said, it's more fan theory at this point, but it's possible that dog meat was one of these hybrids. And that's why he survives from Fallout 1 all the way into Fallout 2. And why he is as tough as he is, right? As much as it is super easy to get him killed, be like, yeah, I mean, he's a super tough dog, but he does get hit in the face with a minigun. His stuff is survived that, you know?
Yeah.
Even the super mutants go down on that.
So, there's 2 obvious callbacks here. One, the previous owner, the leather jacket, funny accent. It's Mad Max, right? Like, that's pulling straight from Mad Max. But then the fact that dog meat being, this genetic super dog from A Boy and His Dog, Blood the dog, he is a genetically altered dog for military uses.
Oh,
and this is why he can't smell food anymore, is because of his genetic. And he is like a super like technical, like plans things out. Like he's extremely smart. He's psychically speaking. That's part of his genetic thing.
Yeah.
So, anyways, it's just 2 obvious throwbacks to those.
Yeah, to dog meat from A Boy and His Dog. Yeah, and I don't know if we mentioned, but and a boy and his dogs. The dog's name is Blood, but whenever the main character is angry with Blood, he calls him Dog Meat.
That's right. Yeah. Vic gets mad at him and calls him Dog Meat.
Calls him Dog Meat. Yeah. So,
and that's where the word name Dog Meat comes from. Yeah.
Yes. So next time we will dive deeper into the story and lore of Fallout 1. But until then, remember, may the water you drink in the desert not shine at you in the night. So let's talk about our treasure room question.
Yes.
So we have encountered some conflicting lore points and within the game, and we have discussed the fact that in Fallout you can make a lot of choices and just kind of go your own way. Now, we also live in an age where there's been a fair amount of retcon to a lot of worlds and universes, from D&D to Marvel, as different owners and creators of these IPs have gone in and changed things for one reason or another. And so the question is, so actually I've got a story here real quick. So way back when I was watching Lost, as the show was coming back out in the 90s, right? It was a big hit. So I'm watching Lost.
Wasn't it 2000s?
Oh, maybe it crossed over, but I think the early seasons maybe started in the 90s. Maybe they didn't. Maybe it started in 2000. So anyway, so at one point in the show, they get off the island. And we already know there's another season coming. But I decided that that's where I was done. That was the end of Lost for me, right? And I heard all about people's frustration with the actual ending of the show. I was like, but I was happy with mine. They worked so hard to get off the island, and they did. And I never faced all the frustration and disappointment that so many of those other fans faced. So the question here is, in the other world and games that you've played, was there a version you preferred? Or if there were conflicting lore points, was there a lore that you did prefer? So like with me, Lost, my ending of Lost is not the official ending, but I chose it and I'm happy with the one I got, right? So be like, I chose this lore, this path instead, and I preferred it. So we're going to talk about some of our choices that are contradiction to canon that we have made in the treasure room. And we'd love it if you would also write in with some of yours.
All right.
Welcome to the FLORE Fantasy and Sci-Fi Lore, wherever you get your podcasts.